Today we're going to be doing a cubistic horse. And so for your supplies, I asked you to have acrylic paints. Now, if I say acrylic paints, you always want to make sure you have your basics. You want to make sure you have your primary colors, red, blue, yellow, and your tints and shades. So you want to have your black and your white. Now you can have all the other colors you want. You can have orange and green. You can have your secondary, your tertiary. You can have any other colors you want, but you always want to make sure you have those basics, because if you have red, yellow, and blue, and you have black and white, you can make pretty much every color in the rainbow, depending on your shade of red and your shade of blue and your shade of yellow. But so if you have those, then you're ready to go. And obviously we need a pencil to draw our layout. And then I requested a palette knife. If you don't have a palette knife or know what it is not an actual knife. It is something you use to scrape your palette. But if you don't have a palette knife, there are a couple things that work fine. You can find a plastic knife you have around, and see this serration. If you see that, that's what those little knobby things. You can use that for texture. You can use this end, or you can always use the end, because your purpose for a palette knife is to scrape and transfer paint in a different way. If you don't, this is my go-to in the studio. If you just have pieces of cardboard, you can use those. They all will give you a different effect. So sometimes if you don't have one, try and getting them, and try using all three, if you have all three, to see what effects you get. So it's just going to apply differently. Of course, we're going to use brushes because we're going to put that on that way. You can paint an entire painting with just a palette knife. You can paint an entire painting with your fingers if you want to. So what we're going to do is we are going to look at this horse. Now you can see there are several horses in this picture. I'll give you a close-up right here, like I always do. You see, we've got a head here and here and here and here. So you have several moving. I also want you to notice the contrast is, look at the horses. They're a cool color. And look at the background, the landscape, it's warm. When you get that contrast of warm and cool, you're highlighting your main subject. So what it does is you could do your main subject in warm and your background in cool, but it draws your focus there. If you do not have blue paint, make this any color you want. If you do not have particular shades, anytime you want your paint to go darker, if it's blue, typically you add black. If you want it to go lighter, typically you add white. Sometimes there are all different other colors that will do special little things to darken. Like I always bring this up because this is the most common. To darken red, you use green. It's its complementary color. And to darken green, you use red. So you can also use red and black. It'll give you a purpley blue. All those give you that opportunity. While I'm teaching this lesson, feel free to add a little, mix a little, do whatever you need to, or just use your color straight. When I'm painting a painting, I always want to add a little something to it. I never want to use pure color, but when we're doing a lesson, you can do it any way you want. Okay, so we'll get right to it. We're going to take this main guy right here, and we are going to somewhat use his shape. I'm not going to do all of it because it does get a little confusing in there. So we want to kind of just put the emphasis right here. That way we can work on our strokes and our paint and our brush and our palette knives, whatever you are using for that. So if you look at this, this is almost like a truncated triangle. Truncated means I take off the point. So if we look at that face right here, I also want you to notice it's over here. If this is our horse, and it's up at the top. So when we start drawing on our paper, we're going to want to be over to this side and up towards the top. So I am going to do what is a truncated triangle. So it's as though I'll draw the whole triangle. You don't have to draw it yet. Let me start up a little bit right here. And then basically truncated is you take off the end there. So let's give you that line. There and there. Now I want to show you something I did. I drew a line. I go, oh, that's not right. Instead of erasing, I just redraw the line that I need. You do not need to worry about erasing until you have your whole picture or you have enough information. I repeat that over and over again because it doesn't matter. This is the initial response because we're humans and we don't want to make mistakes. But in art, this isn't necessarily a mistake. This might be a line I end up using for something later. Okay, so that is our face, our truncated triangle. Then look at this. There's a big oval right here that goes through our triangle. So I'm going to start up about where that is. And I'm going to give myself a big oval. Look, did you see I just went right through it? And that is a big oval. It is 1, 2, 3, almost 4 times the size. 1, 2, 3, a little bit over. I may move y'all a little bit closer so you can see. So you see I came all the way up here. That much of the face goes off. There's our big oval. If we come all the way down to the bottom, we get about 3.5 heads. So 1, 2, yep, right there. So we have this funny shape. There's, again, this isn't necessarily realistic. We've got our cubism. Now, do you see the body, which falls behind it a little bit, so we don't see all of it, is like a circle. The circle comes about down to where our oval ended and starts below where our truncation is. So we're going to come right here and we're going to put a circle, and you don't have to put ... See how it goes behind the oval, but you see where it is. So we've got a circle, an oval, and kind of a triangle shape up here. And that gives us that information. Right now, it doesn't look like anything. So it's kind of fun if you think that you can break all these down and you know that's going to turn into something. All it takes is a few little tweaks and shaping those lines, and you've got a horse. That's the neat thing about drawing. Break it down and bring it to you. And as artists, which I know everyone's been practicing and you're wanting to see things as an artist, this is the way to do it. Okay, so we've got this circle, this oval, that triangle that we truncated. And then we've got a leg that comes down here. Now, I'm going to make that leg almost like a teardrop. We don't see the bottom of it. So I'm going to come to the end of this. And I'm going to come down. I'm coming down below the circle. And then if I did it, it would truncate. So instead of drawing the point, I'm going to come across like that and then come up. It's almost like I was making a teardrop. If it came down little dots, like a big fat exclamation point in a way, if you think of it that way. So, and again, we've got a 3/4 view of the horse. So a 3/4 view is, this is a frontal view. That's a side view, profile. And a 3/4 view is when you see part about 3/4 of the face or 3/4 of the subject. So we see that right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and find, if we're going to come down from our oval, we see, always looking at relationships, we see where that line is. So we're going to come right down here. And we're going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to come off of there. It's kind of hard to see at first because I'm going to truncate. This would be the bottom of my paper, or you can just let it end wherever you want. And we come back up to that oval. This looks a little like a penguin right now. So. Okay, we were in church yesterday, and sometimes Tate, my youngest, gets a little antsy. And so I give him things to draw and I show him, I kind of break it down, like here it is. And I give him a penguin to draw. And it was kind of fun because he started drawing all these different penguins, but I'm sure that was completely related to church. So anyway, we come over here. And we're going to put this final leg. So we're going to come off this end to your widest point. That'll just help you. And just come straight down and come over like that. So there you go. We've got our, we don't see this 4th leg. So it's probably right behind this one. we just see 3 of our legs by looking there. And then because this is Cubist, they've made this neck really big, really like a lot of movement and fun and different. So start off and kind of break it down, and you can make sure you have all the shapes. We've got a triangle that we truncated, basically cut off the end. For the head, we did a big long oval. We did a circle for the body. We came down and did the back leg, carrying it off the end like that and coming back in. We came down and did the front leg, came down and did the front leg. So now we're going to just tweak a few of the details, and then we're going to get in with our acrylic paint. So let's attack that head. That's the part everybody loves to draw on a horse. It's so powerful and it's distinctive and people can relate to it. So even in the Cubist style, you still have your basic elements. You've got your pointy ears up here. You've got those flaring nostrils. Like when you think of the horse, you've got the mouth ready to have an apple, and you've got those eyes. So let's kind of come up here and let's add right up here. We've got an ear that comes up, and you've got another one right behind it. Comes on down. Got a little bit of a mane that comes out. So let's go ahead and give it that mane, and it just basically does that shape. Okay. So with those 2 ears up there, actually go ahead and give that one so you know that 2 different colors. This area right here is white in the picture. You see that? That's where you see the inside and it's catching the light. Now these eyes are very big and pronounced, very simple, but strong. So look where that eye is. When we come down right here, we know the end of the eye. So just take your pencil and kind of lightly move it along your paper. And about a third of the way down. So 1, 2, 3, third of the way down, you can put a little mark. That way you know that that is the end of the eye. So you see how I got that measurement? I came from the top. Might be easier to see. And this is important in all of drawing. This is what you're doing. You're looking life or drawing. So I come straight down from that eye, and I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got about 3 sections. So that's how I know how far. Okay, so let's give it an eyelid. Big half moon. It's a full moon outside. If you saw it last night, it's beautiful, big, beautiful full moon, but we only have about a half moon for that eyelid. And then coming off the top, we come down and give it basically a shape and then come back in. So I'll color this in so you can see what I've done. Right there, that's our, see how we come down? It's like a line. It's almost like you made the end of a golf club. Come right there. Okay. So we've got our ears, our mane, and our eyes. So look at this line that comes right here. I'm going to draw that line in because that's going to help me find my nostrils, but that's also that strong line. That line comes from the top of the eye to about the middle of our snout. So I'm going to draw that line right there. And I made it dark so you can see it. See that? You don't have to make it dark, but that's a strong line in our piece right there. You can even see it. It looks very white. See that line that I'm following? So that way you know exactly where to put your nostrils. You see how your nostril is right there on that end? Go ahead and give me a nostril. So just come up. So just come up straight from there. Just right to the line. It's like you did, just put a circle on the end and then flatten it against that line. Got that nice nostril flare right there. Okay, I'm going to round the end of this. Give my round the top of that. And then we're going to come in and do this mouth. So it's as though we're going to come in and make a shape like this. See? like a triangle right in there. See how our mouth is found? I'm pointing to my paper. Y'all can't even see it. I'm like, see that mouth right there? See that mouth right there? Okay, so that's going to give us the basic head. And we've got most of the other strokes. Let's go ahead and just join in. So where our triangle was, let's go ahead and give us some lines right here. Kind of does that in the picture. It's got 3 lines, but that gives us the end of the head as though it's turning. And then we're going to use, once we've got those details here, I think we can use our paints to kind of move the rest because we're pretty simple. And we may add some things to help us with that. Now, again, remember where I had my lines at the beginning? I'm just leaving all my lines on there until I paint it, and I can always erase. I'm using charcoal so you can see it a little better, but I kind of like the pencil lines. I like seeing the story of an artist. But before you paint it or after you paint it, if you want to erase any, like where that's truncated, you can do that, or just paint right over it. That's why I love paint. Acrylic paint is your friend. It is. It just wants to do whatever you want it to do. So I am going to open up my blue. I'm going to open up my white. And I am going to open up my black. You can use whatever blue you have. If you have multiple colors of blue, you're welcome to do that. You can choose to mix it on your canvas, or I didn't put a palette on the initial supplies. I always have a palette with me. See my paint on the palette. But you can mix it on here. You can mix it there, however you want to do it. So go ahead and get those colors ready, black, white, and blue. And we're going to come in and start attacking our horse. I am, for brushes, I usually have some nice bigger flat brush. If you've followed me for a little while, you know I really like a flat brush. And I've got a nice big round. And then I'll probably have something kind of medium, somewhere around like that. So that gives you, but you can use whatever you have. It still works. And then I brought in all 3 tools. So depending on what you had with you, I could demonstrate that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get some white on our canvas. Now, I'm doing on paper. You say, why are we putting white? Because we are going to mix into it. So I'm going to take my largest brush and white, and I'm going to come into that first circle here. Okay, remember, now it's going to be a little hard to see my white because I'm painting white on white, but I am painting where that circle overlapped, where our circle overlapped the oval. I painted that in white. And don't worry about, you can go over it, you can go, but I just kind of want to get that area. Okay. And I'm going to put it on pretty thickly, and I'm going to move quickly because I need to do this while my paint is wet. So while I have my white here, I am going to take another brush and I'm going to dip it in my blue. So I'm going to keep a white brush and a blue brush. And I am going to come right underneath that neck. And I'm going to come along this end and I'm going to pull it down like this. Now, I'm doing that with my brush first, because I want you to kind of see how I'm mixing it into the white. Take that one. You can also come in . See, I'm trying to get lots of streaky lines here. So this is with a brush. See how I'm making those lines? That's with a palette knife. This is with the end of a knife. And then this is with the cardboard. Okay. So what I want is I want to see those streaks. I want to see those strokes. And that's where, so you can put it on with a brush if you want. You can do it with a palette knife, and you're going to see me use it in all different ways, because today I want you to play with the paint and see what happens. So we should have some blue along that area. Then we're going to do the same thing on the body, except what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right in the middle of the circle with my white. Remember we had that white? I'm going to come right in the middle. So I hope you can kind of see where, maybe if I move it a little bit closer. There we go. Okay, so I've got my white here. Then, so you can start with a brush. I'm going to take a palette knife, and I'm going to come along the top of the horse. And I'm going to pull it in. Remember those streaks? Let's pull it in streaks like that. So that's using the palette knife. See how I get those streaks? Now what I do to use a palette knife is I put it on the bottom. So see it, that's the bottom. See, the front doesn't have very much on it. I put it on the bottom, and then I put it up against the surface, and I pull it, and I'm getting streaks as I move it into the white. Okay. So that's with the palette knife. You keep using a palette knife if that's what you have. I'm using the plastic knife. I'm using the end. I'm going to come along the bottom. And it should look nice and goopy and messy and fabulous. And you should end up with all those lines and movement. Now here is the fun part. So we've got these two sections, and we should have a lot going on. I'm going to take my palette knife like this, and I'm going to cut into it crossways, and I'm going to pull lines. What I'm doing is I'm making it cubist. So I'm pulling lines in like an X pattern. Can you see my lines? I'm using the tip, wherever it might be, or you can use, this is the cardboard. So I pull lines like that. Or your knife. You can always do it with a brush. But what we want is we want lines and marks. I don't want it smooth. I want you to see what happens as you mix that paint back and forth. Okay? And if your paint gets dry, just add a little more white paint, add a little more blue paint, and see what happens. You want to get that stroke. You should get that line going across. I'm on paper, so have fun with it. Don't worry about what it's going to look like at the end. I want you to have fun with moving that paint and finding out what happens. Okay, so we've got the body, and we've got there, and we've got you kind of moving it. We're going to use a brush for this back section with some black and some blue. And for this section right here, and kind of come along, and we're going to touch those up. The one thing is this has a little bit of purple to it. So if I was going to make purple, and I had blue, I would add a little bit of red. So I'm going to grab a red. You can grab a pink. You can grab anything that has a red tone to it. Even if all you have is an orange, that will work. If you don't have any, just continue to use it. And you're going to want to have your black. I'm going to go to the brush I had blue on, and I'm going to just mix this on the canvas. So here's my blue. Here's my black. Well, you can't really tell it's my black, can you? I had so much blue in there. Here's my black. And then here's my red. See those just piled right on top of each other? I'm just going to take my brush and mix them together. And I'm going to fill in this section. Remember that leg down here? I'm going to fill in that section right here. If you need more, you can grab any one. I'm going to add more blue, but any one of those three colors. Do you see how I just mix it right there on the surface? So sometimes if you want to get rid of streaks in painting, what you do is you crosshatch, or you go up and across, up, and you do that over and over. But I'm not worried about streaks, because I'm going to come back in with my palette knife or whatever you have, and I'm going to make my Cubist lines. I'm going to give it some, so I'm using my point, and I'm just going to smear it in. But see how I'm making lines? Add some strokes in there, some lines, some movement. If you have cardboard, you can do it too. If you have the side, you can use your point. And it doesn't matter which way your lines go. You just want Cubist. You want to give it some lines. You want to give it some geometric type shapes. So those straight lines with your palette knife do that. You can even bring some into the belly, like if you want. It's wet. This is a fun way of painting because it doesn't matter. You just keep making a bunch of mess on your canvas. But that's the fun about it. You've got your shapes, you've got your horse. But usually when I'm painting with a palette knife, I like my paint to be pretty thick. But today I have it normal consistency. I'm just wanting you to see how to move it on the canvas and to make those lines and shapes. I'm going to do this same technique that I used on this back leg, and I'm going to fill this leg in. Remember, we put some blue, we put some black, and we put some red. So, and then I just fill in this shape up to that point underneath, mixing that paint on the canvas. There's my point. And then I'm going to use my palette knife or whatever you have. Bring some lines on in there. So see all the lines and movement. Or that. Okay. So I wanted to be real creative with our paint today. I want us to get a little messy. We were pretty realistic last week. We've done some realistic things. Sometimes you just need to get in there and look at the shape and paint. Now, one thing is you can always add more paint to it. So if you decided, oh, that's too dark, you can add some white and also palette knife that in. So it doesn't mean you can't layer up and add different things. You could decide you wanted white right there, or you could decide you wanted some of that dark. And then you come along and you move that line in. All that gets that mixed around on there. Now, if you want a pretty thick paper, so if you're on your paper, just be gentle as you do it. Okay, so, and the nice thing is you can just keep adding paint. So if you get to the point and it's not moving, add a little more paint. Like if this isn't moving, I can add some paint right there and then I can move it. We're not worried. We're more worried about getting these interesting lines and texture in with our palette knife than we are about actually making. Horses usually aren't blue anyway. This doesn't have to be realistic. This can be imagination. So, okay, let's come up and we're going to do along this, and I'm going to go ahead and add same colors. We're going to fill in the rest of this and bring it down. Remember what we did? We put on our paper, we've got blue, we've got black, and we've got a little bit of red. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to fill in this whole shape all the way down to the leg. Right up against that white. All the way up to the bottom of our triangle. There we go. Okay. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to add a couple streaks of white just in it like that. And now you know our game. Give it some lines. Got a little more white on there than I wanted, but you know what? You can always just add some more paint. Look. Get some lines in there. Okay. So your body might feel a little funky. It might feel a little different, but I want you to notice how we marcated, we made sure that each section was a little different, and then we put texture on it no matter what. And by texture, I mean that we moved the lines to create texture in our paint. So it should look really neat and interesting. Don't worry, you can always go back and find those shapes. So we've got this pattern and texture here. So now we've got to do the head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just the blue and I'm going to look at this shape right here and I'm going to follow that line. So I'm going to do this ear and I'm going to do this ear right here. Okay. See that? And then I'm going to come down like a square. Okay. So we've got that back of that ear. We've got that second ear. And then behind the eye, remember that? The bottom of that eye, and we're going to come to about there. Okay. And I just did that in blue. Are you ready? Then I'm going to take some blue. We're going to mix this on the canvas and some black and some red. Remember that? Let's see where I put those 3 little marks right there. And I'm going to fill in another rectangle right here. So underneath that top square, following the curve of the head, we've got that. Now, I didn't put my palette knife in those yet. That's because we're going to use a small white brush. We're going to be a little more detailed on the head. I wanted you really to play with a lot of texture on the body. So we have just our blue, and then we have our purpley blue black right here. You ready? We're going to take a blue, just blue, and we're going to come along the top. Just kind of brush along the top of the head to about the nostril. Okay. And if you can, brush that on down to that line you drew from the eye, and just fill in that area between the nostril and the eye. You see, right there. So I still have a little space around the nostril. I still have a little space around the eye. And then I'm going to fill in the mouth. Okay. So we should have that. Got a few more things. And then I think we're going to kind of find the end of our Cubist pony. So I'm going to take the smallest brush. Let me grab where I put my smaller brush. So I'm going to use whichever one you have, and I'm going to dip it in my black. I've got black. I'm going to fill in my nostril, so I don't want to lose it. And I'm going to fill in my eye. Don't want to lose that either. I want to make sure that's it. And I'm going to outline my mouth. Okay, so we just made sure we darkened up the eye with some paint. We darkened up our nostril. And then with the black, I'm going to paint in this mane. And don't worry if your horse looks crazy, it should. That's part of the fun. This was a fun lesson to use different things to paint with and to look at a horse in a different way. Now, don't rinse off your brush yet. Keep that black on there. And you should have done your eye, your nostril, and kind of outline your mouth and filled in your mane. You should have a little bit of black probably left on your brush. So we're going to paint. We've kind of been using this technique, but I paint with what's called a dirty brush a lot. That means that you're mixing your colors on the palette as well as on your brush. So I've got black right here. I was the mom that let the kids mix all the Play-Doh colors, just so you know. It never bothered me. But I'm going to dip that right in my white with that black. Okay, so I've got black on the inside of my brush and white on the outside. And now I'm going to draw some lines. So see what happens? It makes it gray. This is going to be very subtle. So now I'm going to make some cool lines, kind of crisscross. See what happens, how it mixes it in there? It gives me that look. So I've got white with that black underneath. Let's go ahead and you can find some lines elsewhere on your pony. There's some lines up here. There's lines here. So I'm just looking at this and I'm looking for neat lines. I still have a little black on there. There's a big X in here, but I'm just dipping it in the white. Might have some lines here. This is just the fun part. So we're kind of giving it that little extra, where we get all those moves and our fun, funky palette knife Cubist horse. Now the background on here, and that really is, that's just, it's going to look crazy. But if you isolated this horse, this one also looks crazy. But the big contrast is putting this warm color here. So we're not going to worry about that right here in class. But if you wanted to, you can take your red and your orange and your yellow, and you can come back in and come around your horse, and it will really pop it. It will make that blue and that purple and that white come forward. It will make a big statement. So the idea here today was to let you apply paint in a new way, to look at it differently. So many people come in and they're like, this doesn't look like a horse, or this doesn't look like that. Well, part of learning is figuring out how a brush works and paint works and a palette knife works and on the surface. So applying it in this different way, mixing your paint on your canvas, mixing your paint on your paper, applying it with different tools helps give you an idea for any other painting you do in the future. Plus, who doesn't want a blue Cubist horse?